Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Kate Talcott from Kate Talcott Artistries. We are a woman-owned, family-run watercolor business. We sell watercolor stationery goods and nifty gifties. But we are expanding into the world of education. So this is our first YouTube video in a series of many that go over how to do the basics of watercolor. So today we're going to start with a wash. This is one of the most basic watercolor techniques that you're going to want to have in your watercolor tool belt. So today for supplies, I have my watercolor paper. And when you're doing watercolor, you're going to want to make sure that the paper is secured. So this is on a block, which basically means that the edges are sealed together, so it's going to keep it from warping. You can also, if you just have loose watercolor paper, you can use tape to keep the edges down. So think about if you drop your book in the pool over the summer and it gets all crinkly, that's what we're trying to avoid. So I like to use 140-pound paper because it's thick, but not too thick. Arches is a really nice paper, but since this is just a practice exercise, feel free to use some of the less expensive watercolor paper because I know it can get steep. Okay, so I have my paper, I have my paint palette. For today's lesson, I'm going to be using French Ultramarine as my blue and Winsor Red as my red and transparent yellow if I want to do yellow. And that's really all you need to start for the most part because as we learned in elementary school, yellow, red, and blue can make most of the colors. So if you're just starting out in watercolor, that's a great place to start. I also have some brushes. I have a size 6 and a size 8. I'm probably going to use the size 8 so that you can see, but basically these are round brushes and they're called Princeton Select, and when you're picking the size of the brush, it just means how big it is. So this one's a little bit small, this one's a little bit bigger. And then we have water and some paper towels, just in case. So, and I also have a pencil. All right, so now that we've done the supplies, we are going to get started. So first, let's learn how to make a wash. I'm gonna have you draw a square on your paper. If you wanna freehand it, by all means, go wild. Just taking up maybe like 1/4 of the page-ish. No need to be super precise here. So a wash with watercolor is when you're using wet paint and you're gonna fill the square. It's pretty basic. So let's start with our Winsor Red. When you're using watercolor, you can actually use dry paint and animate it by adding water to the mix. And what you're gonna do is you're just gonna fill that box in. So, whoops, I just throw water everywhere. So just fill it in. You're gonna make sure you wanna have lots of water on your brush. No need to get a dry brush here. You'll notice the paint kind of flows around on the page. I probably wish that I used a bigger brush. Maybe you made a smaller square. Either way, if I'm filling this amount of space, usually a bigger brush would be better, but that's okay for now. This is probably one of my favorite size brushes, so I'm just gonna use it. And you wanna try to keep the paint really wet. You don't want it to dry while you're doing it. So just keep grabbing that water and picking up the paint. I even added a little bit of water to my paint over there. Okay, and voila! Easy peasy lemon squeezy, that is a wash. Okay, so now I'm rinsing off my brush and we're gonna go to the next part. So step 2, we're going to learn how to do a gradient wash. So a gradient wash is kind of that ombre effect as it gets darker and then lighter as it goes on. So I'm gonna draw another square here on my page. And again, if you wanna freehand this bad boy, go for it. Just kind of giving you a visual here of what I'm gonna be doing. And I think I'm gonna use my blue. So my blue is actually wet because I needed new blue today. And you're just gonna wet that paint. You're gonna want it to be really dark. So you're actually gonna wanna have a lot of paint on your brush. And we're gonna start at the top here I even want more saturation there, okay? And then as you go down, you're not gonna add any more paint to your brush, you're just gonna add water. So as you dilute the water on your, or dilute the paint that's on your brush, you are going to get a lighter color. So that's the really cool thing about watercolor is the more paint you have, the darker it's gonna be. And the less paint you have, the lighter it's gonna be. The more water on your brush, the lighter it's gonna be. So I think to make, okay, so I filled this in and I actually think I'm gonna make it a little bit more dramatic. Add a little more paint up here and kind of pull it down, mixing with the water. So you see as I kind of go down, it just gets a little bit lighter. I just add a little paint to my brush here. And that, my friends, here we can even make this one a little bit darker, is a gradient wash. Here we go. And then to smooth the transition, you might want to add a little bit of water. There we go. Okay, now we're gonna get really fancy. So we are going to do a gradient wash, but we're going to start with one color and then go to the second color. So we're gonna be using two colors. So I'm gonna mix red and blue, and it's going to make purple in the middle. So let's draw another little square here. Okay. We've got our little square. Nothing fancy about this square, let me tell you. And then let's start with red at the top. So I'm getting a lot of red here on my brush. Ooh, see how saturated that is compared to the box above. That's because I got a lot of paint on that brush. And then instead of adding water to this mixture, I'm going to add a little bit of the blue paint to my pen, or to my paintbrush. Pen? What am I thinking? So see, this is a very red purple that we have here. Add a little more water just to make it flow easier. And I'm gonna keep adding a little bit more blue. So now we have more of a bluey purple. And don't worry about how the paint is going onto the page, just kind of get it on there. As you practice more with watercolor, you'll start to get more of a hang of how the brush feels when it's adding paint to the page. So that's a little bit of a intense transition here. So now we're almost all the way blue. And then I'm just gonna do my final line in full blue pigment. Wowie zowie. All right, so there we go. And if you want a little bit more blending in the middle, you can always drop in more paint. So like I might just add in a little bit more red here in this transition. Kind of mix it up a little bit. All right, so that, my friends, is a gradient wash with two colors. And there we go. So that's a gradient wash with two colors. So next, I'm just gonna have you draw one more block for good measure. And I want you to take a second to think about which one you wanna do. If you wanna do different colors, this is your chance to practice. So for me, maybe I might wanna do just the simple wash and try to get an even covering. Sometimes if it's a little bit darker on one side, you might want to practice getting an even coloring. If you want to practice adding more water to your brush, you're going to want to do the one color gradient wash. And then if you want to see your colors blend together, get real fancy, then you can do the gradient wash with two colors. So go ahead and try that. I'll give you a second. You can pause your video. And there you have it. I decided to do a gradient wash going vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, woohoo! You just made some art. You learned how to do a solid wash, a gradient wash, and a wash blending two colors. That is an awesome tool to have in your back pocket. Next week, we're going to take a deep dive into glazes and learn about that. So stay tuned. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and check us out over on Instagram. I'm at Kate Talcott Artistry on Instagram, And we love seeing what you're working on. So make sure you tag us so that we can see all the exciting art that you're making. See you next week.